In this video, I'm going to give you 5 tips for improving your orchestra's sight reading by enhancing their technique. Now, technique is a pretty broad term, but in this video, I'm going to go over some techniques that often trip up orchestras in the sight reading room and give you some tips on how to prepare. So here's tip number 1. Learn the proper way to perform pizzicato. Pizzicato is a difficult technique that's often overlooked. Every single orchestra has the potential to rush when performing pizzicato. It seems easy, right? No bow, no problem. Okay, so then why all the rushing? Most of the time, it's because your students are skipping steps. To play pizzicato correctly, one must set the finger on the string, then pull it back, then release the string. 2 of these steps are done before the note sounds. So what happens if a student omits one or both of these steps? The note's performed early. Pizzicato sections are dangerous, so make sure your students know how to play with proper technique so that your orchestra doesn't fall apart in the sight reading room. Tip number 2, learn how to retake. Sometimes orchestras get really turned around if they fail to perform a retake or if they don't prepare the note following a retake. If you don't want to have popcorn bows in the sight reading room, make sure that your students are used to doing retakes and maybe isolate some retakes as rote exercises to use in your classroom so your students can properly learn how to set the bow in the right part of the bow that's appropriate for the next phrase. Tip number 3, understanding dynamics. If your orchestra is attempting and observing dynamics, that's awesome. I like to teach my students how to change bowing lanes, how to play closer to the bridge or the fingerboard to manipulate the sound, how to use bow speed and bow hair manipulation to alter the volume, and how to use bow weight effectively. There are a lot of exercises that you can use to get your students to create dynamic changes that are obvious to your judges. And if you even utilize a couple of them, you'll be better off than a lot of orchestras out there. Tip number 4, understanding shifting and position work. Depending on the level of your group, the sight reading music may not always be in first position. Are your students comfortable with shifting? Do they have experience to find the notes in third position or sometimes second position in cellos? For tips on teaching shifting, please check out Season 1, Episode 11, where I go into a lot more detail on how to get your students comfortable with that skill. Tip number 5, using vibrato. Vibrato seems to be the last thing that we want to address in the sight reading room. Do your students have that technique integrated? Is it automatic? Do they have to think about it? Are you preparing your students with vibrato exercises early in the school year? And if you are, you're doing your students a massive favor. If you need some ideas on teaching vibrato, check out Season 1, Episode 4 to get some ideas. And hopefully, if you're watching this, you still have plenty of time in your school year before the sight reading competition or evaluation. And you can start implementing some of these teaching tips to make your students really comfortable with vibrato so that they're automatic in the sight reading room. Hope you got a lot out of this video. I hope you feel comfortable with preparing your students for sight reading, and maybe you might consider sharing this video with others. Until then, I'll see you next time.